I am so happy to be here in this room with this group of people to honor this man. I just came from Georgia. I lived in Georgia for 20 years. I feel very lucky because I learned something really important. I learned to listen with my heart. I learned patience. I learned to be friends with people who I didn't agree with. And I just want to say that I think it's really important that we don't demonize the people who voted for Trump. Yes, some of them are racist and misogynist and xenophobic and so forth, but many, in fact, I wager most of the people who voted for Trump voted out of fear and anger, and it's quite justified. Don't you think? Both parties betrayed them. And for those people, jobs and doing away with politics as usual was more salient than sexism to women, than minority bashing to immigrants and people of color. And, I mean, Beverly Hills went for Trump. I was having a board meeting. I have some nonprofits that I founded in Georgia. Some of my board members voted for Trump. And what we have to do now, I think, is learn to listen. And not just listen because sometimes they're too ashamed to say, but ask. Ask and then listen. Try to find out why they voted against their own interests, why they voted the way they did. Because we're never going to solve the problem if we don't understand the nature of it, the roots of it. And there's another thing that I want to say. I mean, Gloria Steinem and I spoke to 600 women in Atlanta the day after the election. We thought we'd be celebrating. Okay, I feel like I've been hit by a train, right? Like I'm sure a lot of you. I'm bumping into things, forgetting things, but I'm better today because I've started organizing. I have learned over the years, and one of my first teachers was the ACLU of Southern California, that when you start doing something about it, you feel better. You not only are trying to do good, but also you feel empowered. There's so many things that we can do. We can try to identify and train people to run for local office. We have to start working at the local level, right? The state legislature. We have to give money to Planned Parenthood. We have to give money and support to the ACLU. Maybe we should consider creating safe houses, you know, underground railroads, and banks of lawyers like the ACLU lawyers to protect the refugees and the immigrants who may need protection. Now, you know, there's a lot of old people like me in this room, and we remember another time in American history. There have been many, but the last was, you know, in the 70s with Richard Nixon, and I happened to be among many. I was one of the targets. The FBI planted black propaganda about me, and my bank accounts were taken by the CIA, and my homes were broken into, and so forth and so on. And it was the ACLU that came to my help. Mark Rosenbaum. Is he here? Mark Rosenbaum and co-counsel John McTiernan brought a suit against the FBI, for example, to admit that they had smeared me and so forth. In those turbulent years, we were reminded that the government can be a force for working for us or against us. And we also learned that the ACLU is a force that always works for us. And at every stage along the way, every stage, for as long as I've known her, 40-odd years, Ramona Ripston, Stanley Scheinbaum, and Norman Lear have been there with us. I remember meetings I remember meetings in Norman's house, fighting for the ERA, organizing, planning, strategizing. Remember when he first started the People for the American Way, where he paired me up with John Wayne. See, that's the guy, he's so smart. It was so great. Norman was and remains an industry leader, a visionary, and I'm honored to say a friend. He's never backed off from a fight. In fact, he started a whole lot of them when freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or hey, freedom itself was at risk, and the risk was great. You know, television wasn't known as a progressive industry then. If it hadn't been for the bunkers, we'd still be watching Ozzie and Harriet. If it hadn't been for the Jeffersons, we'd still be seeing Amos and Andy. And if it hadn't been for Norman Lear, we might not be celebrating the ACLU of Southern California. And so tonight, the ACLU of Southern California honors Norman Lear with the award that bears the name of a woman who was always comfortable with people of power because she, I'd love some water, because she has, thank you, because she has such stature herself. I wish it was vodka, though. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge the ACLU's very own Lady Liberty, Ramona Ripston, right over there. Let's put a light on her. Get a light over there, you engineers. And now I am really thrilled and honored to present the Ramona Ripston Liberty, Justice, and Equality Award to the great Norman Lear.
Thank you all so much. Oh. So, how do you follow Edward Snowden and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the glorious, the quintessential public activist and political activist in my life, Jane Fonda. I mean, there's nobody like him. And the one and only, she was running the ACLU when I first turned up out here with Stanley Scheinbaum. And I followed. I took Stanley's job after he left for a couple of years. And then, at the start of People for the American Way, I tried to steal Ramona Ripston. And I did get her to come over to People for the American Way for what amounted to about 10 minutes. But her heart was with the ACLU, as is mine when I'm here thinking about this. Has been just the most glorious evening. Mr. Khan, I'll never forget your presence here and what you had to say, and never. And it's amazing to me that, but over 94 years, a lot of things happened. One of the great things that happened to me was Joseph Gordon-Levitt, when he was 11 years old, worked with me on a show called The Powers That Be. He was 11. I spent a couple of hours with him at a weekend recently at a conference and had not seen the film, didn't say a word about the film. To him, we hadn't seen each other since he was this little guy. And tonight I was able to tell him, as soon as we got home, we looked at Snowden, and I was able to tell Joseph Gordon-Levitt after all those years. And I want to say this about him. I feel like the kid when I heard him speaking, because there's a 9 years old in me that is very alive and well, that finds heroes. And that was a hero, that young man here tonight. And I'm only 9 years old. I raised my first family, 3 older daughters, in the house that Henry Fonda built, that Jane grew up in. And I will never forget a morning living there. It was just after the ACLU saw to it that in Skokie, Illinois, the Ku Klux Klan could march and vent their point of view. And I gave some money to the ACLU, something I did anyway, but I gave some extra money to the ACLU in honor of their working to get the right to march in Skokie, for the Nazis to march in Skokie. I'm awash with feeling about it as I talk about it. And the next morning, up the street, John Gregory Dunn and Joan Didion lived at that time, and up the street from the Henry Fonda house that became the Paul Heinrich house, that then became the Lear house. And they were taking a walk at 6 o'clock in the morning and woke me up to tell me that something had been painted on my gate. We had a wooden gate. And when I ran out to open the gate to see what had been painted on it, I almost tripped over a dead pig that had been thrown over the gate. The blood, and it was an awful moment. On the gate outside had been painted, Jew hater, Nazi lover, because of the gift to the ACLU for Skokie. And when I found out, because the doers of that deed were proud that they did it and made themselves known, it was the Jewish Defense League. The Jewish Defense League. Meyer Kahane, might have been a rabbi too, called me a Nazi lover and a Jew pig or something like that, and threw a dead pig over the wall. And a little bit ago, was it Jane or was it Snowden who talked, or was it Joseph who talked about, we have to begin to understand each other. We have to listen to each other and understand each other. And I had this very personal experience along these lines, that why those words mean so much to me. My wife, Lynn, my son, Ben, both are here tonight. And Lynn and I were flying to Berlin about a year and some months ago. And I had flown to Berlin once before, but I had flown there to bomb it. I was with the 15th Air Force and flew 52 missions with the 15th Air Force. One of them was the longest mission in the European theater, from Foggia to Berlin. And I couldn't help but think of it as we were flying into Berlin. And what I remembered most of all, and I remembered this, I dropped bombs 35 times. We flew 52 missions on a mission basis and 35 sorties on a drop bombs basis. When asked, I always say 52 because I use the larger number because I'm an American. So, as we were coming into Berlin, I remembered I was the radio operator and I had the top gun. And I was the fellow who was closest to the bomb bay doors. So I had to get out of my seat just a little and look over and see that the last bomb had left the bay so that I could notify the pilot that he could close the doors. So 35 times I watched our bombs falling out of our bay and gathering with all of the bombs from the other planes in the squadron and think, holy shit, there's 100 or more bombs falling. They don't all, let's say they don't all hit a target. One of them hits a farmhouse. And I have difficulty, as I say this, wanting to clench my teeth with the hate I felt at the time, not because I'm feeling what I'm going to say next, but because I remember with what I felt when I said, fuck them, the hell with them. I didn't care. Now, granted, there were planes shooting at us. You know, we had planes, fighter planes in the air shooting at us. We had flak from the ground. I had all of those things going for this hate point of view. But I never felt after the fact that explained how I could feel if that hit a family around a table. I wouldn't care. Then I recall on the way home, or perhaps a couple of days later for the first time, I thought the first time it happened and every time it happened afterwards, if anybody came to me with a piece of paper and a pencil at that moment and said, Mr. Lear, sign this, and if you sign this, it will mean you will never care. You meant it 1,000%, you'll never change your mind if a bomb hit a house. And to my toes, I felt I wouldn't sign it. Never sign it. I know I wouldn't sign it. But the fact of my life is, thank God, I've never been tested. I've never been tested. But I had those feelings. So, when Trump started to make his way, and people were, it seemed clear that he was going to go a distance. I never thought he'd go the distance. But I remember saying and repeating again and again and again, he is the middle finger of the American right hand. It was the American people. Thank you. It was the American people saying to leadership generally across the board, whether the equivalent of the banking scandal that was going on, that Wells Fargo was it that recently, or the pharmaceutical company, or the airbag company, or leadership politically, leadership everywhere, anywhere, so disappointing for a form of government that requires an informed citizenry. How could they get it? Talking heads yelling at each other in bumper sticker fashion and calling that media. The American people had a big and important speech to make, and this is the way they made it. Donald Trump, take that. So, I'm back to what we heard earlier about wanting to know more about why people are feeling what they're feeling, and hoping to start conversations where we're talking about the possibility. Because I am, my bumper sticker for some years has read Just Another Version of You. And the documentary that's out now is just another version of you. Because if I could have felt what I felt those times bombing perhaps innocent people, we've got to look into our own humanity and understand that we are versions of one another. And the ACLU, all the years I've been paying close attention to it and feeling a part of it, best understands, as does now a newer organization, People for the American Way. I commend them both to you, but especially the ACLU this evening, and I thank you again. This is, the name just slipped me, this is 94. You got a good look at 94. Thank you, Jane Fonda, and bless you all, thanks.